Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Lion's Den. This is the Weekly Roar. We're continuing to recap the lessons learned in leadership, 2 at a time from my last series, Lessons Learned in Leadership. Now, since that series started well over 7 months ago, I wanted to go back over the lessons in a Reader's Digest fashion and bring back the highlights for you to keep those lessons fresh in your mind. So this week, we're rewinding the clock again and going back to February and March of this year to give you the highlights from lessons 21 and 22. Now, before we jump into that, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Greg Storch, owner of Lion Enterprise, host of the Weekly Roar, and the founder of a worldwide bartered coaching program called The Helping Hand. I'm a certified professional leadership coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. And as a friendly reminder, you can find all of my video resources on my website at lion-enterprise.com. All you have to do is just go to the top of the page to the Lion's Pride Library, and there you can check out all of my videos. Okay, it's time to get started with the recap of lesson number 21, and I called that one, The Value of Influence. My mentor, Dr. John Maxwell, will tell you that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Now, the more I studied leadership principles and reflected on my own lifetime of leadership, I could easily see how leadership could all boil down to this one and only thing. Not only that, but I also began to see the importance of it and how it was used as our leadership roles matured and changed. Now, this is why I shared this lesson with others back in late February, because leaders who move through the different levels of leadership do so by understanding how influence works in leadership and by expanding their influence with others. Now, before we jump into this recap, I want to remind you about the purposes that influence can serve when it comes to leadership, because sometimes the word influence can conjure up negative feelings or a belief that it's only used for selfish gain and the betterment of the influencer. Well, in the context of leadership, influence really serves 3 purposes. First, it exists to give a voice to those who might never be heard, those who don't have influence. Not sure about that? Well, all we have to do is think about Dr. Martin Luther King. He took on one of the greatest responsibilities in leadership, and that was to speak up for those who don't have influence. As leaders with influence, we should be making every effort possible to lift the lives of others up. Now, second, influence gives leaders the ability to speak to others that have influence. It's the ability to influence the influential. When we develop our influence, we gain access to others with influence. It gives us a seat at the table. So here's what I meant when I shared this particular purpose. Now, I may not have access to the leaders of other nations, but our president does have that access. And a good leader will use that influence to make a difference for those who don't. Now, the third purpose of influence was to serve as a tool for leaders to pass on to others. You know, one of our greatest responsibilities as leaders is to develop other leaders. That's how leaders can help potential leaders build a solid foundation in their own leadership. And this was really what that lesson was all about. I used the example of my tenure as the program manager when I worked in Washington, D.C. I raised several leaders, and there were plenty of times where I had to use my own influence to help them establish theirs. Now, you might be wondering how I did that. Well, what I shared that day in the lion's den was that one of the easiest but important ways was by backing them up in their decisions. You know, new leaders typically haven't developed much of their own influence, and that's why it's so important for established leaders to use their influence to help them. As new leaders grow in their leadership, their influence grows with it, and over time, they become a person of influence who don't need others to open doors for them as much as they did before. Now, with that said, I shared 3 things during that episode of the Weekly Roar that others should always consider before loaning their influence. Now, here's a recap of those 3 things. First, leaders must scrutinize who's going to receive that loan. They say that choosy mothers choose Jif. Well, choosy leaders choose who they loan their influence to, and that's what makes them better leaders. Whoever is the recipient of another's influence inherits the responsibility to do something with it, which typically means cultivating it to establish themselves in their own leadership role. Once a leader opens the door for a new leader, they have to make the most out of that opportunity and work hard to gain their own credibility, which is the first step to increasing their own influence. But of course, as you can guess, that isn't always the case. And sometimes people squander that opportunity that they've been given by not taking the necessary actions needed to develop what they've been given. And instead, they continually rely on that source of influence. So the second thing I shared that day was that leaders must hold the recipient accountable for doing something with the influence they've loaned. Now, if leaders give their influence to others without conditions or expectations, they'll spend a lot of their time continually propping them up over and over again. As soon as the tank runs low, they'll come back for a refill. Oh, and let me remind you about this too. Be aware that those who may start taking advantage of you when you're providing your influence to others, they can become used to you bailing them out by using your influence, and soon they start taking it for granted. If that goes on for too long, it can eventually turn into an attitude problem. Don't let others get used to your intervention every time they stumble. The longer that goes on, the longer you'll always be waiting for them to step up while they're always waiting for you to step in. It's easy to shine when someone else is carrying your weight. And that brings me to the third thing that I shared that day, and that was to make sure you're getting a good return on your investment. If not, invest your influence elsewhere. During that lesson, I shifted the terms I was using when I got to this one because I kept speaking about giving our influence to others, but really what I should have been saying was loaning our influence instead. When leaders loan their influence to others, it's really an investment. When you invest your money, you certainly expect a return on that investment, right? Well, the same expectation should be held when investing influence in others. We should expect some sort of return. And if the return isn't good, you invest your influence somewhere else. If you get into the practice of loaning your influence, here were the tips to help you do it more effectively. Number 1, think of loaning your influence like loaning money. Not everyone's going to get it. They have to qualify for it, just like they would have to qualify for a loan through a bank. Qualify the person first. Who are they? What are their values? Are they a person of good character? Why do they need your help? And better yet, what's their plan for using that investment? Just like at a bank, you should know when the loan will be paid and what results you should expect. If you do decide to proceed with loaning your influence, then the second thing is to make sure their business is your business. You should absolutely know how they intend on using your influence. Don't assume that they plan to do something useful with it. For those who are fortunate enough to receive a loan of your influence, make sure you check in on them periodically to ensure the transaction was a wise investment and that it's paying off for you. And then the final tip I gave to help others loan their influence more effectively was to make sure to get a good return on that investment. Know this: if you loan your influence to someone else to help them grow as a leader, you have every right to expect that they take the necessary actions to become a better leader themselves. Your influence is a valuable resource that not everyone qualifies for. And the older we get, the more valuable that resource becomes. So we have to make sure every investment we make counts. Now, if the person you invested your influence in is not improving as a result of your investment, like using their influence to raise other leaders themselves, then you should stop investing and help someone else. In other words, never throw good money after bad. So, those were the three things I shared that day when it comes to loaning your influence to others. Be selective on who receives that loan. Hold the recipient accountable for doing something with it and make sure you're getting a good ROI. If not, you need to invest your influence elsewhere. I want you to remember this when it comes to influence. It should never be given. It should always be loaned. It's your influence, and you should maintain complete control of it when it comes to who receives it and what they do with it. We wouldn't just hand out money to whoever asked for it, and we should treat our influence the same way. All right, that's going to bring us to the recap of lesson 22. Now, this was another one of my favorite lessons during that series, and I called that episode, You Have to Give Up to Go Up. Whoever would have thought that success could actually get in the way of achievement? Doesn't make a lot of sense. But one of the biggest challenges a leader can face is letting go of the success they currently enjoy in order to focus on reaching for something new. They become comfortable. And during that lesson learned in leadership, I shared one of my Navy stories about how I had to start over after reaching a certain level of success. Now, for those of you who may have missed it, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. When I was an enlisted sailor, I enjoyed the fruits of a highly successful enlisted career. I earned a lot of personal decorations and awards. I promoted faster than a lot of my peers, and I was even selected as the Sailor of the Year for all of Navy medicine. Now, luckily for me, I understood that if I wanted to go to the next level, I wouldn't be able to do it staying where I was at. I would have to leave what I was doing, and that's what led to my commission as an officer. I was willing to give up in order to go up. So the lesson learned here is that we all may get to the point in our careers or just in life in general where we must answer one critical question. Am I willing to give up all that I have now for a new level of growth? Now, the one thing I know to be true is that if you want to be successful, whatever it is you're doing in life, it's going to require a series of trade-offs. And as they say, You can pay now or pay later. Doing the difficult things now so we can enjoy them later is a really hard discipline to learn. We all have to pay a price to get what we want out of life. The big question is whether or not we're willing to pay it. Now, because I was willing to start over again as an officer at the bottom of the ranks, I enjoyed a better military retirement and other advantages as a result of my commission. Because I was willing to leave a high paying corporate gig, I was able to pursue my passion for leadership by starting my own business. And because I was willing to leave a new home we had just bought in Virginia, allow a property management company to look after it, I was able to enjoy living abroad. And here's another little secret I shared that day. You might want to write this one down. The more we trade off, the harder it gets because success accumulates. And each time we give up to go up, we're risking more and more to do it. But that's just it. You have to be willing to take the risk. If you avoid risks, you're in essence avoiding the important things in life, including your own personal growth. When we first begin, the trade-off, of course, is minimal. All we really have to give up is our time. But as we keep climbing and growing, we introduce a lot more risk, and sometimes that leads to giving up because we aren't willing to take the risk needed for that next level of growth. Now, we don't have to be in a constant state of change. We all need time to rest and acclimate to that next level before we start our next climb, and that's okay. But what you want to avoid is turning your success into a comfort zone where you settle for the money, the people, the work, and avoiding the unknown and the new. And avoid the unknown, the new friends, the new associations, the new level of achievement. There's a price tag for success, and we pay the price with the things we choose to give up in order to get something better. It's all about the trade-offs, and there are some things that are just worth that sacrifice. So during that weekly roar, I shared some of the things that I thought were worth making the trade to go to the next level. They were the risks that I was willing to take and the things I was willing to give up in order to go up. Here they are one more time. The first one was that I was willing to give up recognition in order to accomplish something. Now, I started this recap by telling you a little bit about my military awards and decorations. At one point in my military career, I saw them as a way to gain approval from others and even as a way to gain admiration from my peers. But guess what? Here I am, 12 years into retirement from the military. And where are those awards? Well, they're packed away and they're forgotten. Nobody remembered that I was Sailor of the Year or if I had 6 Navy Achievement medals. So I stopped wasting time thriving on recognition and turned my focus on achievement. I wanted to accomplish things that mattered. The lesson here is to be willing to give up the pats on the back, the accolades, and the focus on receiving affirmation, and then focus actually on accomplishing something. When we focus on achievement, the accolades will follow. Now, the second thing that I shared that day that I was willing to give up in order to go up was to give up a steady, high-paying corporate job in order to pursue my potential. I left a very lucrative position in 2017 to start my own business. And so I had to decide if I was going to get paid now or get paid later. You see, if you're willing to sacrifice financially up front for the possibility of greater potential, you will almost always be given better chances for higher rewards. Of course, it's natural for us to be tempted to go for the money, but if you're willing to focus on your potential instead, it will cost you up front, but will pay off in the end. And then that third thing that I shared that day was that I was willing to give up security for significance. And here's what I mean. Great leaders aren't great because of all the things they own or what they earn. It's because of what they give their lives to accomplish. They make a difference. When I retired from the Navy, I was leaving the security of community and a steady paycheck. When I left my corporate position, I gave up the security of earning the most money I'd ever made before. But I did those things because I chose to pursue efforts that would result in truly making a difference. And had I stayed in my comfort zone, I'd still be back where I was all those years ago. So that led me to the fourth thing. And the fourth thing I shared that day was admittedly a tough one for me in today's day and age of immediate gratification. And that was that I had to give up some things that brought instant gratification for other things that would result in my personal growth. I can't tell you how many times that I've chosen to put off having luxuries and conveniences in order to pursue personal growth opportunities. One of the personal examples I shared about this one during that lesson learned was probably the largest sacrifice I've ever made. Let me share it with you again. Shortly after my divorce 20 years ago, I was accepted to attend a Navy program that would allow me to go get my master's degree while I was still on active duty and at no cost to me. The Navy paid for all of it. The challenge at the time was that it required a lot of sacrifices. First of all, school was at the University of Pittsburgh. We lived in San Diego. My children lived in California, and we would have to relocate across the country. We would be leaving a community we were very familiar with to go to a place where we didn't know a soul. But I endured all of those things in order to learn and grow. Now, it wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And then I provided one more thing that I thought made the juice worth the squeeze. And that fifth thing was trading addition for multiplication. I got to a point where I had to shift my focus to having more of an impact on more people. And once I decided to pursue a career in leadership, I was able to increase my ability to impact the lives of others. As a doer, there isn't a lot of things we can do that have far-reaching impact on others. One is just too small a number to accomplish anything of significance, but accepting the responsibility of leading others, that's what changed my reach and impact. But here's the difference. Leaders who just gather followers can only add to what they can accomplish. But when a leader assumes the responsibility to make other leaders, then they can begin to multiply their ability. And that's exactly why I do the work I do with new leaders. I'm in the business of growing great leaders. I went on to explain that if I spend my time just leading the people who are following me, I'm going to be limited on the impact I can make. But when I invest my time to identify and build up other leaders, now I can not only influence my followers, but also the followers of the leaders whom I've created. At the end of the day, we aren't just leaders of followers, but leaders of leaders. And if you want to continue the climb to the top in leadership, grow those leaders so you can multiply your influence with others. If you remember anything from this lesson, remember this. If you want to grasp something new, you have to let go of something else. You have to free up your grip on one thing in order to grab another. Good leaders learn to pack light. When I moved to Italy 3 years ago, I sold everything I owned except our clothes and our cats. I had to unload before I could reload. Well, the same goes for our leadership. Every new level of growth that we have the potential to experience as leaders will always require some level of change. We can't have one without the other. If we want to be better leaders, we have to give up in order to go up. And that, my friends, is the price of our continual personal growth and improvement as leaders and as people. All right. Well, that does it for this week's recap of another 2 lessons learned in leadership: the value of influence and why it's important to understand that we have to give up in order to go up. I hope you enjoyed those 2 as much as I did. If you want to keep running to the roar, then join me next week as I continue these micro lessons in review and recap the 23rd and 24th lessons learned in leadership. All you have to do is just come on back to the Lion's Den next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for supporting me and watching the weekly roar today. I appreciate you guys so much. Until we meet again next Wednesday, remember, be powerful, but stay poised just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.